This edition of the podcast covers the most recent episode of Lovecraft Country on HBO. If you haven't seen that episode yet, go and watch it and then come back and listen. That's your warning. A tweeter writes in to @double, the letters PHQ on Twitter. Really enjoying these new intros. Okay, Holly. Thanks. No pressure now.
Time now for an edition of Matt Tries to Speak. Matt tries to say, invulnerability.
On vulnerability.
Matt tries to say, oh damn 10.
Oddington?
Matt tries to say, from this episode.
From the...
Matt tries to say, that. Matt tries to say, is. Matt tries to say, recall.
Recall.
Matt tries to say, Letty.
Letty.
Matt tries to say the word, Matt tries to say, catfish. Matt tries to say, Maldonado.
Melodonado?
All three.
All three.
I think
It was done for all three.
I think, but based on the way you've written it, Matt, it's just simply Maldonado.
Maldonado. There it is.
Oh, I've heard of that before. What?
Double P podcast. Double P.
What I like to call
Double P.
what I like to call
Double P podcast.
Welcome to
Shoggoth Surprise.
Oh yeah, this is a highly ranked and well-received podcast about HBO's Lovecraft Country, and tonight we are discussing season 1, episode 6, Meet Me in Daegu. This was written by Misha Green and Kevin Lau and directed by Helen Shaver. But more importantly, let's talk about us. We're the guys who are going to be blathering at you for the next hour and a half about this episode. First of all, my name is Catfish. You can always hit me up at CJGman67. Another member of the proud Double P network is my co-host. Introduce yourself, co-host.
You can call me Double M.
Double M?
Matt Murdoch.
Oh,
or you can just
sense.
call me Matt.
Okay.
You can call me whatever. You can call me Hey You if you wish. You can find me at Musical Concepts on the Twitter as well.
Well, that is delicious. Matt, I feel we are over halfway home.
3/5.
Wow, that is also 60%. We're just start throwing numbers out. I love it. As you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, first, we give our ratings. We talk a little bit about things. Second, we give viewer and listener feedback. This is great. We're starting a little bit late this week, so we will have some, not just on the previous episode, but on this episode. And then we get into a breakdown of what happened on episode 6. But Matt.
Yes, sir.
What we do before that, always feels like we're always doing it, is we're begging people to give us feedback. There are so many ways to give us feedback. Anywhere you get your podcast, leave a review, follow us, like us, tweet at us. We do a lot of polls. If you tweet at us, use the hashtag Shoggoth Surprise. We also have a Facebook page. That's facebook.com/double-PHQ. Is that right on that one, Matt?
That is. It's the word double, the letters PHQ.
Oh, man. You've got your rap on that, and you love it. And as a reminder, anybody who does any of those things, review, tweet, leave a message on our Facebook page, you will be entered in 4 short episodes. We will be giving away a brand new, will come to you in the plastic, unopened. I won't get you a reconditioned one. It will be a Funko Pop Cthulhu.
Ooh, wow.
And you'll have your option. They have them colored, they have them non-colored. You want to do your own art project during the dark days is what I like to call these.
Mm.
It'll be your choice. It'll be sent right to your door. Matt, I got a Funko Pop of Daenerys and a dragon, and it was used. It's in a box, but it's all taped up. I'm not going to do that to our lucky listener who wins. Okay, so we got the begging out of the way, Matt. Now it's time to get the ratings out of the way. up top, Matt, what was your rating for episode 6, Meet Me in Daegu?
Well, as you know, I tend to be a little easier on these episodes than you, but I feel like this one's justified.
Okay.
I gave this one 8.999999 into infinity triple S's.
Oh, triple S's.
Soul-sucking sexcapades. Look, first of all, Catfish, I love that this episode came from a perspective somewhat outside of our main characters. It felt very appropriate, if we're going to invest in this GI at all, that it come from her perspective rather than Atticus' perspective. I love that their story had a lot of levels in it. There was romance. There was the whole question of the monster within versus the humanity within, or vice versa. The humanity versus the monster of the U.S. imperialism presence that came in at that point, and how people would feel about that. The whole idea of oppression from a different perspective. I loved Gia herself. I felt that her story was kind of tragic. I know probably I should not feel sorry for someone who has stolen 99 souls from this world, but for some reason I did. I found the humanity within the monster, just as I was trying to find the monster within the humanity of all of this, and I love that. I also love the fact that they didn't take a shortcut. They didn't have them just speak in English. I love that they spoke in Korean, that you had to read the subtitles, because I can't hear anything anyway, so subtitles always help me. There is a couple of things, though, that would not allow me to give this a 9. It comes as close to a 9 as you can. But the main thing that really held me back was I have to know whether we really needed all of this. And the question remains. Maybe we do. But what kind of role is all of this information going to play in the end game, other than that little drop of the fact that she saw Atticus die in her vision of his soul? Which opens up another whole book of questions about whether the soul is something that is destined to have a certain lifespan, because she would have seen past his that she was currently at when she was expecting to end it. There's all kinds of questions there. We can get into those if you want. I did think that the actors did a great job. It feels like that until we see what role all of this plays in the end game, it didn't really tell me anything else about the characters that I've already spent 5 episodes prior to this being invested in. The other thing is that there's a storyline since episode 4 that has been completely dropped. Nothing about Hippolyta or Dee in last week's episode, nothing in this week's episode, and they're kind of doing this jaunt back to Massachusetts, where I guess Hippolyta's going to take on, a whole racist county. if we're to be believed by what she was doing, she was looking for answers. It makes me even more worried for them. The longer that we don't see them, the more I worry. But it doesn't help me in the fact that I still don't know what the heck's going on there. How about you?
You had lots of thoughts there, Matt. I dug everything you said. I appreciated that you gave it a high rating, but you didn't have the rose-colored glasses on. You recognized the issues. And because of those exact issues you're talking about, I'm rating this episode 7.2, what I like to call double Fs.
Whoa, double Fs?
Yeah, Foxy Fox.
Oh.
Yeah, that is when you are having sex with a woman, she turns into a fox, and then you get penetrated yourself in holes that don't exist already.
Up to 9 times.
Yeah. Matt, here is my problem, and I had it before. It feels like we're seeing a problem I had before, along with another problem here. Is once again we're kind of taken onto a sidetrack. At least this time we're taken onto a sidetrack with one of our main characters. Matt, did we see the climax of the series in the first 2 episodes? Did they take the first? Did they put the end at the beginning? Did they? There's a term called the in media res for movies and television, where you kind of start in the middle, and that's usually when people do that, it's because they don't have anything interesting to say with the backstory, so they need to start with some action. and make it interesting, and then we'll go back to the boring backstory and then catch up. So I feel like this is interesting, but once again, we've kind of taken on a side quest. We've lost all our momentum going forward. We spent a lot of time on something that's interesting. I'm not going to say that it's not interesting, but it just, as I said before, what I was really hoping for this show would be like Watchmen, where it sort of like gained more and more viewers as people heard about it, and it had this amazing momentum. This series has zero momentum. In fact, I would say this. When you said, is this going to be important for later on? I will bet you that without losing too much, that you could probably have someone give you 2 sentences about what happened in this episode, and that's all you would need for the rest of this show.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's well told. As I told Bubba and I did, the podcast for season 2 of The Terror. And yes, I know I'm not being racist. The Terror was about Japanese internment. This is about the Korean War. I understand that, but still, this is, despite the fact that this is the best episode of The Terror season 2, it is not my favorite episode, and it's sucked a lot of the juice out of this show for me. Now, that being said, the self-contained story was incredible. It's fascinating when we get to it. Is that her daughter, not her daughter? When she says, "I'm not your daughter anymore," and then her mother leaves. When Uma leaves, she kind of tears up. So there's going to be some interesting philosophical things to discuss later. Plus, there's this creepy creature. I mean, there is this really interesting and very complex sci-fi book series by Yoon-Ha Lee, who's a Korean author, called Nine Fox Gambit. And then so there's a lot of Fox discussion in that too. It's kind of interesting. It's a fascinating book. So yes, this fox creature, the Kumiho, was interesting, but Matt, what are we watching here? Like what yeah, we've completely feels like lost the thread of it's like it's not interesting enough, the story we're telling having to do with Adam and the secret society, that this is the second week in a row where we're like, we'll get back to that.
And I can see where you're coming from in terms of that. I do feel especially a little cheated that so many balls have been dropped at this point. But instead of, and I hope that my hopes won't be crushed, but I instead turn that into hope that there's still, 3 or 4 more excellent episodes where we pick things back up and go from there. It's just that having this episode, other than maybe to leave the cliffhanger of what's happened to Hippolyta and Dee, or the whole cliffhanger of Christina and Ruby, what's she going to do about that from last week? It's almost like, well, we got to put this off because we got to get this story in here. So maybe this is the last piece of the backstory puzzle that we need. This is my hope in order to move forward. I just hope that it does pay off in that way. But I was just so moved by the episode just standing alone that I couldn't give it anything less than I did.
All right. Well, there you go. So listen, listeners of our show love to tell me that I'm wrong. I'm thrilled to hear that I'm wrong. And by the way, also, I love to be insulted too. You'll notice maybe not as much as Bubba does it when I do a podcast with him. But viewers, listeners, really let me have it this week. Just give it to me. Speaking of giving it to me, what kind of ratings are people giving to the show?
Well, you asked if a lot of the momentum had come out of the show, and I always look at that in terms of viewership as well. And, of course, we only have the numbers from last week so far. We don't have the new numbers for this week. But there was an upturn of the viewership once again on Sunday the 13th, the weekend after Labor Day, where it had experienced its lowest viewership. We're back up close to 750,000 viewers, so it had increased about 18%. And the demographics had come back up too, which you and I both agree HBO probably could care less about that because, a subscription television show doesn't depend on demographics near as much as a broadcast television show.
Well, right. Last week we did a poll and most people were watching it on HBO Max. I can't tell whether those numbers are included in here, but you never know. That could be, that's simply that uplift could be simply that over the Labor Day weekend, people watched it early on HBO Max or watched it, on demand later.
Right.
And so because of that, the numbers seem to dip. So it's hard for me to, I like seeing the television ratings. I'm not sure kind of what they're telling us for an HBO show.
Agreed. Well, I think the best way to find out what the viewers are thinking about this show is just to get our feedback on it from them.
Well, let's get some feedback. That's what we used to call feedback on The Terror, since again, I would say this would have been the best episode on The Terror. Our old friend...
is that bad? Is that good? Bad? I guess that's bad for The Terror?
It's bad. It's bad for The Terror.
Okay.
Nothing needs to be bad for The Terror. The Terror was bad enough on its own. Terrence Revere at Revere Terry says, does tonight's episode of Lovecraft Country bring new meaning to the phrase Foxy Lady? Oh. See what he did there?
Yeah.
Jubel Brosseau at JUBEL_BROSSEAU says 3 words. I'm losing interest. Jubel, my man. I'm Team Brosseau tonight. That I love the first episode because it seems like we're getting some interesting social commentary set against the backdrop of Lovecraftian horror, but the weird just kind of fizzled, and now it just feels like American Horror Story. Interesting. More like, I would say it is more like season 2 of The Terror. Go ahead, Matt.
It's interesting because I had come away from this episode that we just saw wondering just how Lovecraftian actually is this story, and it turns out not really at all, right? That's a legend. The Kuhimo is a legend from Korea, but it's also based on legends from Japan and Chinese of a fox spirit that either steals hearts or livers or what have you. If you can't tell, I'm looking at this through Wikipedia. So I don't think that that's a bad observation from Jubel. And if that's what we were expecting, just based on the title alone, then I could see the disappointment. So,
well, the other thing is, just as I said, you start off with that big powerhouse 2-parter to start off the show, and then you pretty much, for the most part, let the air out of things.
But Catfish, you and Bubba are about to cover The Mandalorian here next month on the Parsec Passion podcast.
Yes.
Does every Star Wars story not start out with a big bang first and then dial back and develop character and then go forward again?
Yeah, I'm fine with it starting off with a big bang, but then it feels like the air comes out of it. But you don't start off with a big bang and then change. And then all of a sudden you're doing a Western. It that's a bad example because Star Wars is essentially Western, but you know what I mean? It's like, it really feels like, it feels like they've lost the thread to me, and there's no forward momentum. You know what? It would be one thing if things move forward, then we take this week. But last week was also a side trip. And they spent a whole episode on these 2 characters instead of kind of moving the main story forward. Fine, Ruby's fine. That thing is it's fascinating and interesting. But like, as I said, we think Ruby's kind of going to be a piece here, right? You don't spend like a full episode, activating one small piece of the story, and then the other part of the episode giving, background for another character that I don't think is going to really matter that much to the story either. Okay. So this is 2 episodes in a row where ka-chung, we stop.
Well, what did people think of last week's episode, Catfish?
Well, Vernon R. Wright at Vernon_Wright80 says Episode 5 felt like an episode of Black American Horror Story. Look at this again. By the way, I don't know whether that is, speaking of, damning with faint praise, I don't know whether people are up on American Horror Story anymore. So who knows? He says, choked on my pizza at one scene.
Well, that sounds positive.
That does sound good. He said, who says romance is head? I think he meant dead, but it could be head. Who says romance is head? Enjoyed the skinwalker transformations. Who are you when your skin falls off? We'll give episode 3 BSH.
BSH?
Yeah, 3 bloody shoe heels out of 5.
Yeah, it's an average rating, so.
What about our old friend DLL?
Oh, our old friend DLL is Dooley's left legs and says, I've only just seen this week's show. This is in regards to last week's episode. It was okay. I'd give it 7 double M's.
Double M's.
Messy metamorphoses. And had to look up the plural. I thought it was metamorphosi.
It's metamorphoses.
Metamorphosis.
Metamorphoses. That's what the plural is. There's metamorphosis and then metamorphoses.
With 2 E's?
No.
With an I?
No, it's just like a diagnosis and diagnoses.
Oh, okay. So you got to know Greek.
Yep.
To speak with an English chap. Gotcha.
Exactly.
Needle Drop, without doubt, if you know the history of the song, fits the scene perfectly, was Bad Religion by Frank Ocean. That's a good choice. Like it.
All right. And on YouTube, we had Hub the Poet says Montrose won't come out of the closet yet. Keep in mind his boyfriend Sammy isn't even out of the closet. Only a select few. No, it's 1955. And then he said Montrose is definitely good, and I really don't think he killed anyone because that character was already dead when they found her. I love it. Hub the Poet gives Montrose slack. Somebody is dead, and then they come back. Free pass on killing them. Hub, I'm a little. I like your theory, but I'm scared to hang out with you.
Yeah, I'm very scared to hang out with Hub the Poet. What about Chrissy Howard, who says Ruby put down her actual qualifications to get the job, so they weren't fake qualifications; they're just not Dell's qualifications.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
I think you clarified that.
That's what I said
in the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I couldn't. I wouldn't blame Chrissy if she got upset at that point and just fast forwarded and didn't miss my qualification.
Yes, yeah. Because I questioned it, and then you saw where that got me if you listened to last week's podcast. It got me a scolding from Catfish, who was teaching me how to use the English language.
Oh, it's
That's why, Chrissy goes on to say, that's why she isn't angry at Tamara.
Right.
She's resentful that Tamara applied first and then got another dagger to the heart that she doesn't have nearly as many qualifications as Ruby does. There's nothing in the potion making Ruby act like this. In fact, I think sometimes she forgets she's in her white skin, and that's why she talks to Tamara to try and get her to have pride in herself and want to better herself. Yeah. Then there's the blow of the break room scene when all the white girls say they don't want another colored person, and Ruby says as long as they're more qualified than Tamara. Then the response she got was none of them are qualified. Now she's starting to see that being white isn't all it's cracked up to be. I believe in the basement are William and Dell's body. What, in the basement of the house that Letty
We kept
has?
saying what? No. We kept saying
what's in the basement?
What's in the basement? What's in the basement?
Yeah, the potion that Christina has, she has to extract from somewhere, so it only makes sense that she was holding their bodies slightly alive or whatever so that she could extract the blood. I believe her story about William was true, or at least partially true. I say partially because she may not have William's best intentions at heart. Either if she found him alive, she could have healed him, or they could have worked together, but instead she's taking his place just like Ruby is taking Dell's place, aka Hillary.
I love it. Chrissy, you should do your own podcast because you've got a lot of good information, and then instantly it would be higher ranked than our podcast.
Instantly. It doesn't take much to get higher ranked than us. I haven't even checked the ratings this week. It's that depressing. The only problem I have with Chrissy's second theory.
Uh-huh,
and again, I can't discount it in any way, shape, or form. But how long ago was it that William was shot? Is the question I would have, because we saw him at Artem. Are we to assume that that was Christine as well, since we never saw them in the same place then?
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
where all the theories are going.
That's where Bubba.
So
that's where
where
Bubba-
was William's body then, if she needed access to it then?
Well, there was plenty of doors people couldn't get into.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can accept that.
All right.
The other thing Chrissy asked us was if it would be possible for YouTube, for you and I to do live videos of us instead of just using those pictures that I do on our videos.
Nobody wants to see that. Literally, nobody
I-
wants to see that.
You don't. We're really trying to save you a whole other horror series on your own, Chrissy, by leaving our faces off. On top of that, I don't even have a video camera for my computer, if you can believe
What are
that.
you living
I
in the
know,
dark ages, Matt?
It's 2020, and Cubase keeps me tied to a computer that I keep destroying and putting back together so that I can keep my Cubase,
The other thing,
version that I like.
the other thing you may not be aware of, Chrissy, and people probably don't realize that they think because the podcasts are an hour and a half, 40 minutes long, that you get everything. No, you're only getting the gems. So Matt's already having to edit out some idiocy audio wise, and for us to kind of edit a video would be non-starter.
You know what, though? It might be trendy. You'd have a whole bunch of jump cuts in it, wouldn't it?
That would be great. Bubba and I did do a couple live post shows for Game of Thrones. We have no producer, by the way, so it was like we're trying to talk and answer on the Facebook Live and read feedback. It was crazy. Anyway, so
tell that to the Creative Guild. They do it every Tuesday night. Check them out.
All right. Well, you know what? Some people are professionals, and then there's us. Okay,
And
for
then there's
episode 105, once again, our Null Test Channel has 3 words: icky transformations. That is good.
Is it technically 2 words? I don't know. It's the same word twice. I guess technically it's 3 words, but it feels more like 2 words with emphasis to me.
And I suppose you think that Null Test Channel shouldn't have a first name of Null Test Channel and a second name of Null Test Channel. Matt, makes no sense whatsoever. Null Test Channel is a first name, and then they repeat it, so you know it's a last name.
Okay, so icky is acceptable here. Okay.
Absolutely.
We got some polls, too. We got lots of polls because I just can't seem to stay off Twitter on Sunday nights.
Love it.
Last week, Catfish and I asked a question, what's worse? And we asked a couple of things regarding last Sunday's episode. And the first poll was stilettos. Is it worse to be killed by the assault of a stiletto?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it worse to survive the assault of a stiletto? Only 800 votes, a small sample size on the 100 Twitter this time.
It was probably too painful for people to envision it.
Yeah, well, 62.5% said it would be worse to surviving it. And I would concur with you that it was too painful to think about. But that wouldn't explain our next poll, which only had 600 votes on the 100 Twitter.
Okay.
Which was, what's worse, having no tongue or talking without a tongue? And we've had ties before, Catfish, but we've never had just a straight, flat tie where there's no clear winner. 50% each.
Matt, I'm sorry. Could you go back and explain how we've had ties before, but also had a clear winner in those ties?
Sure. We had a tie in the Bubba nicknames. We had a tie between
because we had
Bummer Bubba
more than
and Buzzkill Bubba.
Understood,
but we had more than 2 answers.
Okay,
So,
got it. Now I understand.
But good try. Good try to catch me. Good try to catch me, as I usually am easily caught.
I was bewildered.
All right. Here was what my stupid poll of the week that you can always catch at Musical Concepts. Sometimes they're retweeted by at the word double, the letters PHQ on Twitter. Be sure to follow them for all of your latest information about podcasts coming up. But another Lovecraft Country poll that we did was, is conjuring butterflies a complete waste of magic or good for breaking bad news? And 58.3% of 1,200 votes on the 100 Twitter said good for breaking bad news. which goes against what I thought, which was a complete waste of magic.
Listen, if you're gonna have some bad news, you might as well have some flittery stuff. But Matt, last Friday we had some bad news, and I dove into a veritable pool of butterflies. So there you go.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
All
right.
I have no idea how to respond to that.
All right. I'm just saying butterfly puddle, Matt. It's the cure for what ails you. One more poll you had said, was Ruby's form Hillary was the same as Dell, the sheriff from Artem? Was Dell a transformed person also? We had a disagreement on that. Matt, this was our biggest poll. 1,300 votes on the 100K Twitter. 53.8% said yes. 38.5% said no. 7.7% said other. And one of the responses, we can't say them all, but one of the responses was Chi-Chi or not, at Chi-Chi or not 2 says, I'm trying to find out if any of these people are real. I'm starting to think Montrose isn't. Ooh, that's interesting.
Wow.
That's a good point we haven't discussed. I mean, although Montrose seems to have, for the most part, he seems to be himself. He's an asshole to his son. It appears that he had that relationship was pre-existing. At least we didn't get an idea that his significant other was new. The only thing is he's destroying anything that is going to lead them to answers. So it's possible that he is not real. All right. So here's one more poll. Does the potion affect Ruby's perceptions, opinions of race, as well as her physical appearance? 23.1% said yes. 76.9% said no. And we got some feedback on that. Ray at TRUGRL Black, True Girl Black, says, I honestly thought about this when Christina was revealed to be William and earlier explained how William was quote unquote killed. Maybe the sheriff caught him with a black woman. This could be why when Christina is William, he's attracted to Ruby. I kind of thought that, he's just using her. It wasn't like, hey, look, I'm going to involve myself with a random person who just happens to be the sister of someone whose house I'm trying to get into. But Ray also says, or how when Ruby turns into Dell, she's kind of in between that prejudice mindset and who she actually is. You know what? Let's talk about this, though, because I love that the listeners brought this up because we talked about, like, does it make her more, does it affect her personality?
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the prejudice mindset, I mean, my feeling on this was she was only really upset with Tamara and her situation because, or Tamara, I forget how she was pronounced, because she got the job and Ruby didn't, and also she was very not qualified for the job. And this was Ruby's, I mean, for lack of a better term, this was her dream job. She was really focused on this, and for someone else to get it who hadn't tried so hard, can you think of? I'm not. This is not a question I'm expecting to know the answer to. Can you think of other reasons in which other ways in which she showed her prejudice while she was that character, Matt?
No, I really can't. And last week, though, I would have argued against you. I'd have just on first impressions. But after hearing Chrissy's comments, I think we're both Team Chrissy on this perspective now. But I love the fact that Ray here was offering us an alternative and offering extra evidence about William here too.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And I'm honestly trying to think if I'm missing something here, and I just think that you could explain away Ruby's attitude while being in that other skin as one, either being upset that Tamara got the job and she didn't, or two, kind of like going along so she doesn't like get into a fight with her coworkers. I mean, she definitely doesn't go along and like, yeah, they're horrible, we don't want any more of those. So it didn't feel like she completely bought into that prejudice mindset. Listen, I love it when we get feedback that makes us think, for sure. So let's get into a recap. We got lots of great feedback from last week. Keep that feedback coming. The best part about the feedback, if you give us feedback, number one, we'll read it. Number two, we'll read it at the top so that you can only listen to the top of the podcast.
You no longer have to listen to what we think about anything. You just simply tweet to @theword_double, the letters PHQ on Twitter. You can also find them that way on Instagram. You can leave comments. Just search out Double P Media on YouTube and find the videos of these podcasts there. You can leave comments there. Or you can go to the Facebook page where they always post each new episode as well. That's facebook.com/theword_double, the letters PHQ.
You know how we like to, when possible, separate the different storylines. So we only talk about one storyline at a time. So tonight, first and only, we'll be talking about the Gia storyline. That's the entire episode. So, we talked about this a little bit. We talked about that amazing sci-fi and very complex sci-fi book series I read by Yoon-Ha Lee. The Machineries of Empire. The first one is called Nine Fox Gambit. It's really it's just fascinating. I would recommend this if you like sci-fi at all and you haven't heard of it. Download a sample, and from the sample you'll be able to decide. It's like complex space opera. So get into it. Very cool. All right. So this is a we're dealing with what's called a kumiho here. This is a fox spirit, as you said. Now
Nine-tailed fox spirit.
Nine-tailed fox spirit. So that's why we have the Nine Fox Gambit. But before we get the spirit itself, we get introduced to Gia, who is watching almost by herself a Judy Garland film in an empty theater. There are a couple other people in the theater, but they're not watching the movie, and the girl doesn't like to be watched, so they bail. And then we have an amazingly fun little song and dance number that we think Gia is doing now that she's alone. That turns out to be just in her mind, but was glorious.
Yeah. I'll say, in fact, I already put up a poll asking if anybody knew that Jamie Chung could sing, because I'm pretty sure that was her just singing along with it. And that was gorgeous. She's got a great voice.
It was great. The whole thing was great. Sadly, she goes back to the house. Her life is not glamorous. She's with mom. They're making their batches of kimchi. What I like about Gia is she likes her kimchi spicy. You got to have kimchi spicy. It's delicious.
Yeah, and not to jump too far ahead in this scene, Catfish, but there was one other thing that I didn't bring up at the top that I really want to. This is a very opulent place for South Korea that her and her mom are living at, right? So they have had money before. And part of this whole thing about the mother talking about shame and your job is to bring a man home or whatever because of what GI is, also stems from economic dependence. They don't have any money, but they're living in this very opulent home, it seems like.
Well, Matt, I mean, we could go through we could go through the revelations as they happen bit by bit, but why don't we, since we know the whole backstory, let's talk about the whole backstory up top.
Okay.
Just because even though it was revealed to us bit by bit, it's helpful to talk about the rest of the story this way. So, Gia's mother, Uma, had her out of wedlock, and there was since she was sort of disgraced and shamed, she married another dude who apparently liked young girls, and because her mother had already been shamed, it appears that the mother knew what was happening to Gia, that her husband was taking advantage of the very young Gia. And so she called upon through this witch that she knew, that apparently they go back to later on, who is very odd, and called up this spirit to kill the husband. Now, why she couldn't have just done it normally, I don't know, but as part of the payment for the spirit, apparently the spirit cannot kill only one person, but needs to take 100 souls before it will depart. So that's the
Right.
backstory that is gradually revealed to us. So when we see that at the beginning here, they are poor. It seems as if, she says, Gia's like, I'm going to graduate and then we'll be respectable again. And the mother says, interestingly, no, it's not until we have men that will be respectable. And so what that deliciously sets us up for is the normal expectation, Matt, that what they're trying to do is find a husband for Gia to bring respect back to their household, to bring a bread earner back to the household. And so when Gia does bring someone home, we are completely gobsmacked about what happens. So
it does play. It plays on a lot of tropes that we shouldn't fall for, but it certainly did.
Well, it's that part of it, that delicious, that turn they set up very deliciously, and so that I say is well done. So then we see, after the discussion about bringing a man home, we see Gia in her nursing. She's they're standing over a body. They're nurses, and they're obviously in training to be nurses. There is one woman there who is apparently very popular. All the girls gather around her when she's talking about how she went on a date, and they spoke. Apparently, there's like this is something that I'm sure more people know about, but the idea being that kind of in these kind of more formal in the olden days in societies where it's like more formal introductions, that there is a sort of dialect that you speak that for people that you are not intimate with, and I don't mean intimate in a sexual nature, but it's sort of people that you are getting to know. But this girl, Racy, went right to the common tongue, if you know what I mean, Matt. This is interesting. We're going to see a lot more about. We're going to find out a lot more about this lady. This is another turn that is fascinating, because when we first see this woman, it's another thing where we're set up. Oh, this is the snooty bee that all the guys like, and she's just a man killer, and that also turns out to be completely the wrong situation.
Wrong man killer there.
This girl, yes. So she goes to a meeting. That's what they call them. A meeting. It's not a meeting, Matt. It's a meeting. Okay.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, it's funny. I presume this is real. I didn't know that there was such a thing as speed dating in Korea in the 50s. Now at the end, the guy says, "Okay, compare cards," which I presume was, I participated back in the day in some speed dating. In fact, one time I did it with Bubba, and I went to the same event. It was quite amusing, and then we ended up double dating. Once girls we met from that event. That was completely fascinating, and a story I'll tell you one time when we're drinking and are able to be at another convention, Matt.
Okay.
Yes.
How many 31s were scratched off of those cards?
Well, the reason I kind of brought that up was because he says compare your cards, and I thought the whole idea was, okay, like in the speed dating, it's like you say you like somebody and the other person say they like you. Okay, boom. Here's your information, email each other or whatever. But I didn't see any of the women having any cards, Matt. I don't know what cards they were supposed to compare, unless it was the guys being like, okay, all right, we all selected 30, so now we got to fight. But it appears no one selected poor 31. So the guy who liked movies is going to go off with the total stuck-up Stone Cold B. But the Stone Cold B invites her. Once again, I'm thinking, just to like kind of rub it in her face. And so while she's out, she does meet a guy and looks at him, and she takes him home. Man, I was completely surprised because she seemed like a nice girl. The one thing that sort of made me, and again, maybe I wasn't paying attention, Matt, but if you walk into a room and there's like 30 candles, and the woman lights one candle and they all light, Matt, I would say get the F out of there.
Yeah. And I want to back up for just a second.
Back it
because
up,
there was
Matt.
this moment where her friend touched her hand and kind of held it for a second. And at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I was totally misled because here's Mama saying, "Bring home a man," and then those two touch, and I thought, oh, maybe Gia has different feelings. Maybe she prefers, the same sex. And I was totally cool with that, but maybe that's part of the reason that there's such a rift between Uma and Gia. As it turns out, and again, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but that was totally misleading to me. That's my own just looking for something for no particular reason. Their friendship turns out to be quite beautiful. I didn't expect that.
Matt, it's funny that you say that because I'm going to jump in and disagree with your feeling like you were misled. Because again, I mean, what the heck? Let's talk about it now. It happens later, but let's talk about it now. She completely has a conversation with her friend where it was like, it is okay to be different. And I thought the subtext with that was about liking women. I didn't think that the subtext from her friend was, I'm a commie, it should be okay to be different. I thought that was the subtext.
Oh, see, I didn't scratch into the surface any more than that. Once I got to that scene, I was just kind of like, oh, they truly are friends. They truly do like each other. They're just pals.
Wow, Matt, how naive of you. Well, hey, look,
okay,
Matt, listen, we love to do this. Let's put it on the poll. Were they just really close friends, or did they have romantic feelings for each other? I think they did have romantic feelings for each other, and I think that was the whole subtext of her friend saying it's okay to be different when, Gia is thinking, you don't know different, my friend.
Whoa.
Oh. All right, so she brings the dude home. She lights one candle. They all get lit up. She starts to have sex with him. I'm completely confused at this point simply because she did not seem like, also because the mother said, bring somebody home. And I thought, you know how dudes are. You give them, the milk right away. They're not going to buy the cow. So I thought this is definitely not the right way to get a husband. This is, this guy's going to not think of you as like marriage material if you give it up on the first night. Turns out that is not what was happening altogether, Matt. She turns into a fox female.
For editing purposes, a triple F.
Triple F. And then Mama comes in, and Mama's like, all right, 1 down, 10 to go. I was like, holy cow. By the way, Matt, again, it happens twice in this. It happens twice in this episode. I'm going to talk about it now anyway. And the second time we see the mom cleaning up the blood, but how are they going to clear up the walls? Those are like mats. Like, it would seem to me like it would take forever to clear the blood off those walls.
Hard workers.
Yeah, I might just change the color of my walls.
I think I would just do a new paint job every time.
No. What I'm saying is just paint them red, Matt, and then you're done.
Oh, no.
All right, so we see Gia back in the theater, where we've got a very nice racist cartoon going on. And then Easter parade starts. The picture gets disrupted. The film burns. There's an earthquake happening. It is the Americans rolling through town saying, we're here to save you. The funny thing is, Gia never mentioned, or her mom never said anything about them needing to be saved.
Well, it appears to me that Gia could handle it just on her own. And isn't it just like the Americans to say, we're here to save you by ruining your one form of entertainment in this town?
Yeah, well, they ruin a lot more than that by the time everything is said and done.
Mm-hmm.
Then we find out her story. She absorbs men's souls and he remembers their entire lives. Mom says, bring another man home. The American wounded seemed like a good place to start. I don't know if the wounded are a good place to start. Do you want like sort of damaged bodies, damaged souls? That's fine. But she does say that they are rapists no better than the Japanese. And then we find out that when she gets 100 souls, then Gia can come back and she only has to take 2 more souls.
Yeah.
So then she's hanging out a little bit more with her friend. And she realizes that her friend is a communist. And this is where they have the discussion about being different, and there's a lot of touching. Then they see a communist who has been hung up. I have to confess, Matt, I know we were involved in this disaster, but I can't tell you much about the politics of the Korean War. I'm sure that, well, grounding in that would help explain this a little bit better. Not that we don't need to know much. We just know the Americans roll in. They're pissed off at the communists, and that ends up being very bad.
Well, yeah, it's just the whole idea of essentially what they're doing is they are oppressing a people in the name of their own kind of imperialistic interest. They hide behind the veil of, we're stopping communism.
Right, communism
which was
is bad.
the goal, but at the same time are looking down on them as opposed to North Korea, which would be their own people.
Well, after they see this, Jia's friend gets upset, so Jia decides to make it up to her by giving the eye to an American MP, takes him home, blows him up, and then that's when we find out that mom thinks once the 100th soul happens, her daughter will be back. There's this whole discussion that, again, I mentioned at the top, Matt, that I wasn't quite sure about whether that's really her daughter or whether that's just a spirit that has learned to care. She clearly cares about her friend. She does care about Tick. Where do you come down on this, Matt? Is it, first of all, is it Jia or is it Jia just and then the spirit comes out of her, or is it the spirit who's completely taken over Jia? I mean, the reason why I had a hard time with it, there's two things. One, after she tells her mom that there's no more, that Jia doesn't exist anymore, and the mom leaves, she starts to cry. The other thing is, I don't know the complete backstory of Kumiho's, but it's unlikely there's any legends about them really being into Judy Garland. So where do you come down on this, Matt? Because it feels like they kind of left that in the air for us to sort of decide rather than really coming down one way or the other. Based on,
I believe that Jia, the girl, Jia, is there somewhere. She's somewhere in there. But that this fox spirit cohabitates Jia's body with her, and at any point, one part or the other may have, predominance over the other, and perhaps that Jia, that part of Jia is still in there, and kind of, makes the monster tick or whatever. The beautiful thing is that Mama Uma says that she sees parts of Jia in her. And so that tells me that it's a coexistence. It's not one or the other, but at any one time, one may take control of the other more so than.
I just feel like we never see another personality. That it's Jia, and then during sex, unless she can control it, and then she can't even control it even when trying during sex. That's when the Kumiho comes out. So, but so the thing that
or when the Kumiho comes out to talk to Mama.
See,
because that's what I got. The tone, the facial expressions, everything changed in that moment to me.
But then when she left, when Mom left, there were tears in Jia's eyes, and so that's the problem that I'm having. Because I feel like you have to be that you're right. Because otherwise, why would she? Because if it's just her, why would she care whether she takes 100 soul or not? It's still her in there. But I also don't feel like I really. So this is another thing to me where it's like, it's not clear, and I have a problem with that. It's still not clear to me right now.
Okay.
So that I have a problem with that. So anyway, let's go on with that. Maybe our listeners will provide some feedback on that too.
Yeah, tweet to @theword_double, the letters PHQ on Twitter, or comment in our Facebook page, facebook.com/theword_double, the letters PHQ.
Now, the next thing we see is the nurses are all taken out to a camp somewhere, all accused of being communists. They start shooting them. One of the guys, who is a black soldier, his bullets run out of his gun, and so he makes another soldier come up and shoot the second nurse, and that soldier is Atticus. It's Tick. So at that point, Gia's friend says, I'm the communist, I'm the communist. They drag her off. We didn't see her killed. But in fact, later on, again, it happens later, but let's talk about it now. Later on, we see a flash that Atticus was there while they were torturing her for information. And this does bring up some backstory, something we suspected earlier in one of the earlier episodes when there was like the honking outside. Atticus mentions that that's a kind of tactic used to disorient and torture people. And at that time, Matt, I surmised that he was involved in torturing of people because he knew about that kind of tactic.
Yes, you were correct.
I end up finally being right about something. So then
Catfish was right.
Catfish was right. So then we see Atticus again. This time he is all messed up, and he's in this. He's in Gia's hospital. Now I have to confess, Matt, I wasn't really paying too much attention. I didn't feel like before I saw Atticus that there were actually a lot of American soldiers in this hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so is the possibility that I didn't consider until now is that maybe they send the minority, the black soldiers, the minority black and Korean and whatever soldiers to the Korean local hospitals. That still seems kind of a stretch to me. I don't know whether it's quite believable. But
well, there were plenty of white guys in there too.
Okay, we'll see. I didn't pay attention. So
there was one white guy that was complaining, and this is shortly, just right before she sees Tick.
Mm-hmm.
There was a white guy that was being drug in, and he said, "No, you're not going to cut my leg off. These Korean blah blah blahs are going to cut my leg off." Right. Blah blah blah. So,
all right. Well, so she sees him, and she is really upset. He's very frustrated because his glasses are broke. He can't read his book. And when she goes home, she's like, even though I said I'm not going to take anymore, this is the guy I'm taking because she just wants to make revenge on her friend. Right. But then she gets to know him. He helps her make the bed. And then he's like, can you read the rest of this story to me? And she says, no, you don't want to read the rest of this book. It doesn't make any sense the way the plot works out. And she explains him the plot, and he says, well, instead of completely dismissing her, what he says is you should read the book because it's different in the book. So, he's not, in a way, he's sort of mansplaining, but on the other hand, he's not saying, don't be ridiculous. And he does seem to appreciate what she says.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's being much more open-minded to her, which I think gets her, intrigues her a little bit. Not only I don't know how much sympathy she was feeling for him when he's obviously frustrated by the fact that his glasses are broken and he can't read it.
Oh, no.
When he asks, and they have that, when they have that discussion, then she's like, oh. And what I love about Gia, be that the monster or be that the girl within, is the curiosity about it allows her to go ahead and read it as well.
Right. Her feelings toward him are changed. They talk about how their parents want them to be something different than what they are. Again, this sort of, anytime there's discussion about Gia's feelings, Matt, it seems strange. Like if she was just the Kumiho, for her to lament like, my mom doesn't want me to be Kumiho anymore, when it's not really her mom. It's kind of a strange thing because she feels
Catfish,
it genuinely.
to me, this is the important exploration, though.
Okay.
Can you find humanity within the monster? For me, that was one of the big themes of the episode. So it doesn't really matter whether it's just the girl coming out or if it's the monster itself, because, and we can get to it in a minute, but I just feel like in the end, the monster is accepted as the more human.
All right. Okay. So we move forward. Kumiho slash Gia and Tick really getting along.
Yep.
She is there she's waiting outside the base to go on a date with him, and his Korean American friend brings her on. She's like, we're supposed to be going out, brings her on, and we find out something interesting that apparently the only people allowed on base are sex workers, which is strange. I don't know why you would allow a sex worker to come on the base.
That's where you go recruiting for spies, I'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. So she gets brought into a tent, and Atticus is there. And the really cool thing is he has got the movie that she was going to watch, that she was desperate to watch, that got ruined by the Americans. That movie he has for her, Easter Parade, and somehow he explains. He gives backstory that we already know and didn't really need for about his uncle.
Yeah.
Getting it, and then they watch. They have a very kind of romantic time, and then she brings him back to her place. And then interesting that Gia was Tick's first, then Tick was Letty's
Tick
first.
was Letty's first. Yeah.
She starts to have sex with him, and then she's like, "Get out," and he is gone. Very scary. Mama says having feelings about the man who killed her friend makes her a monster and spits on her. And so then Gia decides to confront Tick about what he did. They both admit they're monsters in their own way. She's going to find out exactly how much of a monster he is later on. And then they have sweet, sensitive sex. No monster comes out. And then she tells her mom that she can control her foxtails. But until Gia tells Atticus about what she is, that it means nothing. So it's fascinating here. You'll probably find it even more fascinating, Matt, because this is the linchpin of this episode for you, is that it is only when Letty's monster comes out that she finds out how much of a monster Atticus is. They both find out how much of a monster both of them is, whereas Atticus, Gia doesn't have a chance to reject his monstrousness. He rejects her monstrousness. Not fair, Matt. Not fair. Just because she's got 9 foxtails and they start to impress himself on her body, it's really judgmental on his part. Very judgy.
Yeah, I was going to say Tick is clearly not as open-minded as his father. Father? Question mark.
Right, father. He tells her that he has enough points to go home. He wants her to come with him. Matt, I thought this is one point I ruminated on, and I couldn't figure out what the answer was. I mean, as bad as things are for him at home, it feels like he would get a lot of grief in his community if he brought home a Korean woman. I'm trying to figure out in which country they would have been more ostracized being together. Would it have been America or would it have been Korea? Either way, this is super, super tough.
In 1950, there's no good answer for this. They need to just move somewhere completely different where nobody pays any attention to either of them.
I'm going to say Paris. All right. So, Well, interesting thing that happens here, that's never happened to her before, is that she doesn't just see the horrible things he did in the past, but she can see some things happening to him in the future, Matt. Now, that's the most fascinating thing that happened the entire episode for me. And that includes dudes getting eviscerated by foxtails. Yeah.
Here's the big question that I alluded to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What does destiny have to do with this?
Mm-hmm.
If she is seeing his soul in the future, is that history already written, or can it be changed? Is there something? Because clearly, the 2 times we got the phone calls before, she was warning him of this. She was, or she was trying. As we see at the end of this episode, she's screaming at him, "You can't go! You can't go!" Because she sees what's going to happen to him. And the whole thing with this last phone call about what are you and everything. Why didn't he? The only question I have is why didn't he ask that the first time he called her? Because he's clearly seen all this already. So that seemed a little bit out of place. But I still, the big question for me is, and what intrigues you is, what did we actually see happening with Atticus there? When is it, and can it be avoided?
I mean, if she's able to see it, so let's figure out this, because the way we left them seems unlikely that that's the way things were left. In other words, he left and they never communicated again until the first time she called him.
But he calls her. I don't think she ever calls him.
Okay, so it kind of feels like we're getting short shrift here, unless really, he decided, like there was never any discussion about what the heck just happened. That's it. That was the last bit we saw. There was the last time they communicated until earlier in this season.
Well, it's certainly by the question that Tick asked in episode 5, what are you? That would tend to make you think that they never brought that up before. And he only but he just referenced to Letty. He just told her that things with Gi had ended, what did he say? Strange. Yeah. Right, really strange.
I mean,
freaky, strange.
There is strange. Okay, so we do have a bit of an end with Gia. Mama takes her to the shaman, and she says, "I will bear the punishment for not getting the 100th soul." And then Gia asks if Atticus will survive what she saw in her vision. The shaman talks about thousands of souls and how mortal concerns shouldn't bother her. Yeah. You know what bothers me, Matt? What the heck is going on? That's what bothers me.
One thing that really struck me, and again, this is about the humanity versus the monster. One thing that I loved is that as Gia is there, she's heartbroken, she's destroyed, and Mom takes her into her arms and treats her like the daughter that she doesn't really believe is there, but she's grown to accept the Kuhimo as her daughter in a way. And then she's willing to sacrifice to get her daughter back with the shaman. So that's a mother's love that knows no boundaries whatsoever. But this whole cryptic thing at the end is obviously just a trivance to make us go, whoa, to make us ask the question that I just asked. Can the future be changed? Can the future of what is a soul? Is it an exact finite definition of destiny, or is it something that can be changed? So we're supposed to ask those questions, right? This is where we're supposed to be confused and just say, and what does the whole thing about the shaman telling Gia that she will be in darkness at the end as well, which makes me think that some of this has to, in some way, specifically play towards Atticus's future, and I just don't know what that is. It's got to.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's got to. It just I don't know. It feels a little disjointed, Matt. That's all.
I got you. Well, I think that you can make an argument for that. I just feel like right now I am trusting Misha Green to bring all of this together in a way that will pay off in the end. Maybe not perfectly, but I do feel like that this exploration, a very deep exploration into something that, other than what we talked about, seeing Tick, her seeing Tick's death, it's hard to see how all of this relates, but it's got to relate in some way. And I'm just, I'm putting my faith in Misha Green and Jordan Peele and all of the other showrunners to bring it home in the next 4 episodes.
Okay. All right. Let's see it.
So, Catfish, if we're done discussing the episode itself, we could play some fun games.
Let's do it.
All right. Maybe we can bring you out of your disjointed funk by asking which is worse.
Okay.
And my which is worse is Which is worse, the film version of The Count of Monte Cristo or the book version?
Which film version?
Oh, good question. Which film version did we have to ask? Which film version did Gia watch?
Oh, that's a great question. Hey, fascinating, by the way. Ms. Catfish was stunned, and we learned something new here when Atticus said that he thinks his father dug it simply because it was written by a black man. And surprise, surprise, new information for Ms. and Mr. Catfish. That is absolutely true.
Right on.
It's Alexander Dumas. Who knew? Not
Who
me.
knew?
Not me. I did not know. All right, so I'm going to say it's going to be the film version. Come on. It's always the film version.
Yeah.
Tell me one thing where the film version was better.
I couldn't because there's no way that a book can ever be adapted into a film as well as the book version, in my opinion.
The only time actually, I would say there's two cases. There was two cases. One is I read do you ever see the movie Election? Alexander Payne movie. And it was simply because the book itself was so slight, they were managed to capture all the intricacies of it in the movie. And also for a television show, Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell, way better than the book.
Really? Oh,
Book is
Bubba's
stupid.
turning in his grave right here, isn't he?
Bubba's angry right now. All right, so viewers, you decide what's better.
I just killed Bubba. I'm sorry, Bubba. I didn't kill you, did I? I just did.
Turn in his grave. Okay, what's worse, Matt? Being tortured to death with pliers or Fox to death?
At all. It depends. Like, it seems like the first guy had his business done. He could die a happy man. You know? But if you're mid-stride, I don't think that would be a very good way to go.
Matt, I'm very disappointed in you, but also I'm glad that you did not pick the correct answer. If a question involves dying and one of the answers is you're dying while having sex, that's always the better thing, no matter if you're being penetrated by 9 foxtails.
Oh, I thought you said something about pliers. Hang on, re-ask that question.
Yeah. What's worse, being tortured to death with pliers or being fox to death? It seemed to me that you thought that being fox to death was worse.
Well, you're alive to feel the pain of the pliers.
Exactly.
For how long?
It's worse to be tortured to death with pliers. I'm team fox to death. Always better. All right. What's your 3 words for this episode, Matt?
Love, lost, lament. Oh, poor Gia and Tip. They would have been great together. How about you?
My 3 words are number 31.
Number 31.
Number 31. That's Gia's number. Number 31.
Number 31.
Number 31.
Very good.
Yeah. Were you counting the words there, Matt?
I was trying to decide whether 31 was 1 word or 2. That's all.
Oh boy! All right, Matt. While we let the listeners,
I needed my toes for that one.
While we let the listeners puzzle over that, why don't you discuss the cuts during this?
Yeah, it was all Judy Garland pretty much this time, except for maybe an exception here or there. We had, of course, the Trolley Song by Julie Garland in the cast doing "Meet Me in St. Louis." We had actually the showcast, somebody from the showcast whose name I did not get, performing Bésame Mucho, which was actually originally written in 1940 by Consuelo Velasquez. There's been several popular versions, but the 1956 version is probably the one that most people have heard, by the trio Los Panchos. And we also heard the main title from Easter Parade with Judy Garland. We had You Wonderful You with Gene Kelly, and you guessed it, Judy Garland. And then we had a spoken word, which, according to the Hollywood Reporter, this is where I had to get this information from. Richard Newby wrote an article on it on Sunday night, saying that it's Judy Garland actually speaking late in life with that quote. I've spent years and years and years trying to please. Through singing or acting, there's nothing wrong with that. And yet I've constantly been written or talked about by certain individuals as an unfit person. Well, what kind of people are they? What kind of business are they in? They're dead people. Now, the interesting thing for this is I tracked down a version of this recording, and it's from what's called Judy Speaks, Volume 3. I found it on SoundCloud, and I'll leave a link for that in the show notes. But I'm not quite sure that it was the actual recording that I heard there. It's the same words, but either they've done some finagling with it, sped some of it up, slowed it down. Some of the inflections are a little different. So I'm not sure if it was the actual recording of Judy Garland saying it, or if it was just a cleaned up recording of Judy Garland saying it, or if it was another actor just impersonating it. I did not find out the details on that. So if you folks know, please send a tweet to @musicalconcepts or to @double, the letters PHQ. So, Catfish, out of all of that, what would have been your favorite?
You know what it is, Matt. It's the spoken word. It's the spoken word every time. I think this is really interesting. I think it really kind of accentuates the the cases you're trying to make about people and expectations and all that. So I think that's really cool. Now, what about you, Matt?
Well, I would have gone with any of the Judy Garland stuff. I love Judy Garland too. Probably not as much as Gia, but almost as much.
Right.
But I really dug the version of Besame Mucho in there. It was so cool. And again, this happens so much where we see different cultures picking up on the pop culture of the Americas. Originally, that tune was, of course, much more of Mexico's Southern America tune. But it was cool to see Korean culture picking up on that, just the same way that cultures do that all of the time as we continue our imperialistic march to dominate the world.
Matt, finally, it's the moment everyone's been waiting for in this podcast, and that is Bubba's late comment on the episode.
You know how I love how you've now moved this to the end of the podcast so that you're hoping that Bubba will have turned it off by the time we start talking about the story so that he won't hear the fact that you're putting words in his mouth.
I'm actually not. He just tweeted us 6 minutes ago, and he said, This is the best episode of the season, in my opinion. And he said, Tick and Gia have more chemistry than Tick and Letty.
Wow.
So there you go.
Wow.
That's,
see, Bubba is Team Matt. I like that. Bubba knows what's going on.
Yeah.
We should have him back sometime. Speaking of having your back, there's been a lot of episodes where there were just two notes that were being played to represent a threat, and also two notes to represent fighting back against that threat.
All right.
That's my musical analysis for this week. Hey, if you're not into that kind of stuff, I'll do you a solid here. Just skip ahead about 14 minutes and 25 seconds, and we'll say goodbye after that.
Oh, wait, please, wait.
All right, so the music analysis is over. Catfish, if people want to tell you how wrong you are about this episode, how do they reach you?
They can hit me up at CJGman67. What about you, Matt?
They can hit me up at Musical Concepts if I am wrong as well. Don't forget double PHQ, the word double, the letters PHQ, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can go to facebook.com/the word double PHQ. You can also hit up Double P Media on YouTube. Just look it up. You'll find the channel. Leave comments. Leave us reviews on whatever podcast app that you're using. That's the only way we can continue to stay probably about your 105th favorite podcast covering this episode and this show.
Yes, with a bullet.
And remember to use the hashtag Shoggoth Surprise. That's
Shoggoth Surprise.
That's SHOGGOTH, sir, with the R, prize. And if you do any of those things, you will be entered in a contest to win a Cthulhu Funko Pop from the podcast, meaning Catfish.
That's right. I'll be sending it directly to you. And next week, also coming directly to you, is episode 7 of the podcast known as
Shoggoth Surprise.
It's catfish.
What's really important for our podcast is we like to share listener feedback. We like to be told if we're wrong.
It's double M.
Please reach out to us. Tell us why catfish is wrong.
2 wonderful panelists.
Double P podcast. Double P.
What I like to call
Double P.
what I like to call
Double P podcast.